This is the third tutorial for the Queen Revolve object. When we look at the drawing, we see that the crown has these cuts in it, these scallops that we need to replicate on our queen. We can see ours does not have those, so we need to find a way to make those. Now, this is done through an extrude cut from the top part, cutting down towards the body. But if we try and sketch, there's nowhere here I can sketch. And the reason for that is because I cannot sketch directly on a curved body. And everything up here on the top of this chest piece is curved. So what I have to do is I need to create a flat work plane to sketch on. Now, there's a lot of ways I can do that. I have lots of different ways to create planes. What I'm going to choose to do, personal preference, I would say, is to use a tangent surface parallel to plane. I generally like that parallel to plane aspect because I can choose an existing plane and just put it in a different location. So if I open up my origin folder here on the browser and I roll over the existing planes, the origin planes, what I like to do is pick the one that I want to make parallel just in a different location. And this is what the XZ plane is the one I want to replicate because it is essentially flat on the bottom and I want one flat on the top, so parallel to that, just in a different spot. So I can highlight this and then click the button, or I can click this button and then go highlight it. Really doesn't matter. And once I have this selected, it's going to give me possible locations to put my plane. You can see how it previews it here. And I'm going to go to the very top. I just feel a little more comfortable that way. So no matter what happens, I'm only cutting in one direction. So now I have this work plane on the top, and on this work plane, I can easily start a new sketch and start doing my scallops, which I can see in my drawing here. This top view shows me exactly what I'm looking for. Now, I don't have too many dimensions here, and honestly, depending on if there was a little variance in any of your measurements, these won't work if your crown was any different than what I have here. So what's more important to do is use the existing features, the existing crown, and we can do that by using our project geometry tool, and essentially allows us to import lines that already exist or circles that already exist. Now I have a lot of different circles that pop up, so what I want to do is tilt it to the side so I can make sure I'm getting the top edge of that crown, because that's the one I want. And as you can see, once I click it, it imports it into my sketch. And now that's the sketch that I'm going to use as a guide. I'm going to put one more circle on the top, and that's going to be a construction circle. And let's make it a construction circle. And this is going to help me guide all my center points, so I can have all my center points on the same side. I'm going to get back to my top view, and I'm just going to use the arc tool, and I'm going to start making these arcs. Now what's really important is that your arc needs to be tangent to that yellow line you just made. Tangent. We'll go over why in a minute, but just know we're going to be using a lot of tangents in this sketch. So I'm going back and forth and creating, I keep doing construction. Let's get rid of that construction. Just doing a lot of arcs. Now I'm just going to do 3 to show you right here. Actually, I'm going to do a few more than that. Now, it doesn't really matter where I end up with all these. Now, I'm not accounting for how many actual cuts I have here. You need to make sure that you count how many and replicate that, but I'm just showing you the process, not doing all your math for you too. So my tangent constraint is going to be very important for this sketch. For one, I need to make sure that all these arcs are tangent to each other, but that's not the only thing. I need to make sure that this curve is tangent to the larger circle. That's going to make sure that my cut goes right up to the end. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and do one more arc in here. Actually, should probably do two more. Now, the reason I can move those around is because I have not given them a diameter yet. And they're still green. And as we know, green things I can usually move around. If I had given these arcs a size, a dimension, then I wouldn't be able to move them around. I wouldn't be able to shrink them and expand them. So it's kind of important you don't start assigning those values because you actually need that flexibility. Now, one thing that I find extremely helpful is to use a constraint to keep these items vertical. Now, I actually want to say that it's a horizontal constraint I need because I'm kind of looking at this upside down. So if I put a horizontal there, oh, I take it back, I was vertical. Some of you may need to use the horizontal instead of the vertical, just depending on how you first made your object. I'm going to go horizontal on this side. And so now I'm doing exactly 1/4 or 90 degrees of this 360 degree circle. That's what those two vertical and horizontal constraints help me do. So I locked in this edge and this edge. Now you can see that all my arcs are not the same size. Well, I know if I use an equals tool that I can make them all the same size. And I want to say this arc is probably the closest to the right size. So I'm just going to start here and make all these the same size. So there we go. So now all those arcs are the same size. But we can see the center points are not all in the same area. The way I like to do it is use my circle that I already put in there and put my center points on one of them. So I'm going to use this inside curve and put all those inside curve center points on that line, because that's going to hold my geometry. And I am missing a tangent right here. I want to make sure those are touching. All right, and I've mentioned a tangent there. The rest of the curves look good, but let me make sure there's one there, and there already is. Okay, now I'm getting there, I'm not quite there yet. Now we can see that this curve starts on the circle and this one does not end on the circle. So I need to make sure I do that. All right, that looks pretty good. Now, some students have been successful using the circular feature to replicate this quarter circle around the whole diameter of this, and some students have not been able to do it. So you can try to do the circular pattern tool and recreate this, but if it doesn't work, then create it by hand, and usually it will extrude out that way. My axis obviously would be that center point. And so there you go. So that's the idea of the circular pattern tool. It's a little bit of a time saver, but sometimes for whatever reason, and I haven't been able to dive in and find out, is it doesn't let you extrude even after you do that. For our purposes, let's go ahead and try it and see if it works, but you know, there's a good chance it may not. So let's find out. Okay, looks good. Let's see. Can I extrude that? So as you can see, the extrusion is just not working right. So what you need to do instead of doing that circular pattern tool is go back and draw these in by hand, going all the way around, put your constraints in, and then go ahead and extrude cut it. And when we extrude cut it, we're going to want to go obviously down, but make sure you don't go too far down where you're cutting through other components. You only want to cut through this crown area. So you're going to have to play with your distance to get that correct. And that is how you put those designs in the crown. If you have any questions, please let me know. But otherwise, go ahead and make it happen.